Hello there. I'm Dr. Bradley Wolfe, and I'm going over Chapter 11 in the Public Speaking Project textbook called Speaking with Confidence. This chapter talks a lot about apprehension, which is anxiety a lot of people have around public speaking. Or public speaking tends to be one of the biggest fears that we see across the United States. And so this gives a lot of tips on how to deal with that and how to be more confident in your public speaking. So the textbook is defining the fear of public speaking as communication apprehension. Communication apprehension is more broad than just the fear of public speaking. You can have communication apprehension in interpersonal or small group situations as well. So there's a variety of places. Communication apprehension is more of a broad term. The fear of public speaking is specific to the realm of public speaking. So that's just a little introduction. You certainly can read through that if you want. But again, in order to be an effective public speaker, you want to develop the confidence to say what you want to say, right? You don't want to be nervous. I've seen a lot of students who say they're super nervous when they're giving speeches, but they still do a decent job with the speeches. So some of that's just having a self-awareness that you're actually doing a good job. You're confident in what you have to say and just, feeling good about it. But certainly if you're doing the work and putting in the effort, that's going to make you more confident, less anxious, and less apprehension about going into that public speaking situation. So there's a few ways that theorists have defined communication apprehension. Some researchers have called it about trait anxiety. It means it's a trait that people have, a personality trait. So I do have a little bit of communication apprehension as a trait that I have. It talks about, people maybe being shy. Certainly when I was younger, I was very shy and had, social anxiety, which I think is a more common way of talking about communication apprehension. So the trait anxiety you're gonna have it in public speaking. You're also gonna have it in maybe interpersonal situations, small group situations, right? It's a trait that you have that goes across a variety of communication situations. One of the reasons why I studied communication is like, hey, I'm very anxious. I don't like doing that. So I want to grow my skills and be better at it. So that's one of the reasons, again, leading into maybe one of my weaknesses for what I was studying. But I think that helps me understand some of these ideas better because I had to really think about it and work hard at becoming better, be very intentional about it. There's also state anxiety. So it's a type of anxiety that's about the situation. So maybe you're, feel great talking to people, enjoy those interpersonal interactions, you're active in small groups, but it's the state of a public speaking situation where you get anxious. So that's where you may have communication apprehension as a state anxiety, where you're just anxious about that situation. It also could be, the state anxiety could be a variety of situations with communication apprehension. Again, if we go away from public speaking, you may have anxiety maybe in the workplace that's specific to the workplace and that you're finding other places you feel more comfortable and confident communicating. So state anxiety is that state, that situation in which you're anxious. One of the reasons that people may have state anxiety around public speaking specifically is because of a scrutiny fear. So you're doing activity which your other people are looking at you and scrutinizing you. Right? You're afraid of that. Oh, they're watching me. They're thinking about, the way I look, the way I talk, my ideas and what I'm saying, and being criticized. And right when you're a student in the classroom, you often are being graded too, which again, no anxiety. Right? No, I don't like being graded. People are looking at me, whatever it may be. But again, one of the tips, we'll get to some tips on how to deal with that. But one of the tips it talks about is saying, as an audience member, are you sitting there like nitpicking every detail of what they say or do and criticizing them, or are you supportive? Right? Most audience members are supportive, right? They want you to do well when you're presenting. I want you to do well as your instructor, right? I want my students to do well, um, when they're presenting, because I want them to be successful in the class. So we're not necessarily scrutinizing and nitpicking everything. Often what I'm grading is what I look for is compliments, right? Here are things you're doing well, which you can build on and maybe give one or two pieces of feedback, which you can do differently. But it's really about those successes that I want you to say, hey, you're doing well, right? Here are some things you're doing really well. And that's what I look for. Because everyone has different skills that they bring to a public speaking situation. And again, going back to my own communication apprehension, I know I was not a great speaker in the first few times given speeches, but I appreciate the support that I had to become better and more confident over time. So it talks about how communication apprehension is known as a resultant condition. So it's as a understanding the primary cause that, hey, it's a result of this situation. For, again, going back to the sustained anxiety, okay, here's what's causing it, or maybe it's a train anxiety for you. Here's what's causing it. So understanding the situation and what's causing your anxiety or your communication apprehension is the first step into becoming better and overcoming it. So here are some tips for a variety of ways to build your confidence, right? And again, it depends on what specific you may be anxious about or may want to build your confidence in related to public speaking. Maybe you don't have the communication apprehension as much. You just, want to build your skill set, organizing your ideas, right? There's a variety of ways to go through. So it talks about a frame of reference. So one's frame of reference is the context, the viewpoint, or a set of presuppositions or evaluative criteria within your perception. So your frame of reference is how you're viewing the situation. If you're viewing it as something that you're going to be, I don't know if I'm going to do well, right? I'm getting graded, those things that can cause anxiety, you may be giving yourself more anxious. Whereas it talks about other frames of reference, you may be excited about it. So it talks about if you're a fan of Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, there's some anticipation, you get excited about it. One of the things that helped me as a speaker is getting excited to share the ideas with the audience. It's like, hey, this is something that I learned about that I think is really cool, and I want to share it with you too. And so that was one of the strengths I brought to the public speaking situation. Even though I had communication apprehension, my frame of reference, I was able to change it to say, hey, I love learning, and this is why I'm a teacher, right? I love learning, and I love sharing ideas with other people, right? That was always one of my strengths that I brought to the communication situation. So if you can pick a topic that you're passionate about, I think that always helps. You have a more positive frame of reference, like, hey, this is really exciting for me. I'm going to show you why it couldn't be exciting for you too. So again, changing your frame of reference, looking at it differently can be helpful. So it talks about a habitual frame of reference. So just what's common in our society. So the situations which we have formal public speaking opportunities, often in the workplace, we talk about school, like a public speaking classroom. So there's often being some evaluation or judge. You're judged by your coworkers, you're judged by your teacher, classroom. If you're giving a speech in public, you may be getting judged by the audience. That's why when I give speeches in public, I still have, some jitters, just saying, I don't know if they're going to agree with what I'm talking about here, especially when we're talking about more, sensitive issues. Like I talked about diversity, equity, inclusion in rural areas. And so that's something that I've done, given quite a few presentations on that. And I'm always anxious about it because, like, how is the audience going to react? Because it is sensitive and hot button issue right now in our society. But often after I get into the speech, I start getting positive feedback from people that they really like the way that I approach it, which is why they hire me to give speeches in rural areas about diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I do it in a way that's approachable to that audience. So again, there's that judgment there with public speaking that people, again, you have the audience looking at you and as part of the situation. So you may look at that frame of reference that can be had. Then there's also the personal frame of reference. So based on your personal experiences giving speeches, right? The more experience you have giving speeches, the more positive experience you have, the more confident you're going to be. So being able to have that personal frame of reference, I've given many speeches before, they've been successful, so this one may be successful as well. Whereas if you have, you mess up in a speech, again, newer public speakers who don't have a lot of experience, you're probably going to mess up. You may think, oh no, I was, looked like such an idiot last time, I don't want to do this again, right? That may be your personal frame of reference. Well, the best way to overcome that is to start having some positive experience as well. So again, it's going to be anxiety provoking, and you're going to have that communication apprehension going into it. But you can help change your personal frame of reference by having more positive experiences over time. So it talks here in this next section about cognitive restructuring. So again, looking at changing that frame of reference that you have. So it says cognitive restructuring is a 3-step internal process. First of all, you identify objectively what you think. What do I think in this situation? Identify any inconsistencies between perception and reality. And then 3, replace destructive thinking with supportive thinking. So I think this speech is going to go terribly. I'm so anxious about it, and I don't want to do it, right? So 2, any inconsistencies between perception and reality. Well, the reality is I haven't even given the speech yet. So my perception that it's not going to go well is not based in reality, right? And it's pretty destructive thinking there, right? It's destructive. I'm going to do terrible at it. So more supportive thinking, hey, I'm going to give this speech. I am putting in the time and effort to be prepared. And so it may go well, right? It may be successful. The audience may find some benefit and value to the information that I'm sharing. So again, being able to restructure and again, think about, what do you think? Identify those inconsistencies and then have a more positive outlook can help you be more successful. We'll give some examples here in a moment. So again, you have to think about what are those sources of apprehension. So it talks here that the author writes about two of the most common concerns for students are one being the center of attention. Hey, everyone's looking at you, and that's very anxiety provoking. And the second one is the feeling that the audience is waiting for you to make a mistake or slip up somehow, right? I'm not waiting for you to make a mistake. If you need a moment to breathe and recenter yourself, go right ahead and do it. It says here that their disapproval is going to be swift, immediate, and embarrassing, right? The audience is not trying to make you embarrassed. Think about your own experience as an audience member. Are you sitting there just waiting for people to make a mistake? I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you're that type of person. Most of us aren't, right? Most of us want to be supportive of our colleagues and classmates and want them to be successful. So we're not sitting there trying to, laugh at them or anything else. I know sometimes in especially more K-12 education, there are some students who don't take their education as seriously. They want to joke around and laugh, and so certainly that could be part of where it comes from. But in higher education where I teach, right, I don't see that happen in my classroom. I have not seen any students laughing at each other, making fun of each other, having disapproval of what they do. Often it's a supportive environment. Once in a while, we'll give constructive criticism, right? We're learning, we're trying to be better, but often we're there to be supportive. So the impact of the apprehension here, so again, being the center of attention, it talks here in this paragraph about the center of attention. It's highlighting everything for me. This first paragraph is the center of attention, the second paragraph being judged. So you certainly can read through those if that's one of the things you particularly have as part of communication apprehension, that you don't like being the center of attention or you don't like being judged. But I'm going to move on here to some of the learning confidence here. So when you're learning confidence, how to be a successful public speaker, the audience wants you to succeed. Again, said that many times now, but the audience really wants you to succeed. And it takes time, it takes patience, it takes practice to do well. So again, you can prepare a lot beforehand, right? There's so much preparation you can do, but that's the first part of it. If you're prepared going to that situation, you're going to feel more confident. And then the second part is if you have more experience. So the more times you give speeches, the more confident, hey, that went well. Okay, I've learned. Maybe I can learn how to do better. This is the ways I did well. This is how I want to improve for the next speech. So again, having some reflection can help build your confidence as well. Again, focusing on that continuation of the different skills. And throughout the textbook, right, this is just about confidence. Throughout the textbook, you learn a lot of other skills that are going to help build your confidence. So it does have one chapter right here on confidence, but you're going to have many skills that you can. But some techniques specifically for building confidence, I don't know why there's a typo there. Looks like something's missing or got put somewhere else. So it gives an example of Michael Jordan, and they've done some research on basketball, and this has been successful. And Michael Jordan says you cannot learn how to shoot free throws by walking to the gym with the ball, walking up to the line and shooting. Instead, you have to learn how to shoot, right? You have to learn. So it talks about running sprints and practicing other aspects of it, and getting mentally in the position before you start shooting, right? You start preparing before you get to the shooting process. So learning how to kind of catch your breath and again have that rhythm. And so they've also talked about with basketball, they've done the research where if basketball players who know the technique, right? You have the basic techniques down. They sit there, close their eyes, and envision themselves shooting successful free throws. Again, this is building confidence. They're not actually throwing anything. They're just envisioning themselves throwing. They had one group envision themselves throwing, and another group were actually practicing. And then they went out and looked for improvement. So kind of beforehand, then the exercise of either practicing or envisioning themselves doing well. And then afterward, the group that envisioned themselves doing well actually improved more than the group that was practicing. And that, again, group of basketball players who know how to shoot free throws. But that confidence was a huge part of it. And being able to envision yourself doing well is a huge part of it. So again, building your confidence is going to help you become a more successful public speaker. So that's why it talks in this next section about visualizing success. So envisioning yourself doing things successfully. That's a quote here. I visualize things in my mind before I have to do them. It's like having a mental workshop. And that's by Jack Youngblood. So again, visualize your success. Visualize yourself presenting to an audience. The audience is receptive. You can see yourself being relaxed, and the audience is picking up your vibes and giving, nodding appreciately, giving thoughtful consideration to your points. And the audience is getting it, right? They're taking in everything, and they're getting excited about your topic too. So again, that visualization actually works. It's helpful, and certainly you can try it out if you'd like to. I encourage you to, right? It can help you be more successful. It also says avoid gimmicks. And here it says avoid practicing in front of a mirror. It can be helpful, especially if you're looking at your nonverbal presentation. I think recording yourself with a camera and watching that back is better than practicing in front of a mirror. Because practicing in front of a mirror, what it says here too is you're so focused on the way that you look, and your audience isn't going to be right here looking at you, right, like a mirror. Your audience, especially if it's in person, they're going to be spread out from a distance. So a mirror is not even the right visuals to be looking at. Whereas a camera, you can kind of step back more, see your body posture, your nonverbal expressions, and it's more realistic. Now, if you're giving a presentation over a camera, like right now, I'm recording this with Zoom. Record yourself, give a speech with Zoom, and listen to it back. One of the things that has helped me about listening to recordings is sometimes if I get very either excited or anxious, either of them, I start talking faster, and it's hard to understand me when I'm talking fast, right? So it's like, okay, breathe, slow down. That's one of the things that I learned by recording myself speaking. So again, that sort of practice can be helpful just to see it from another perspective. It also talks about a breathe and release strategy. So again, just taking a deep breath and then letting it go, right? There's a variety of different breathing. You can do there's just breathing square, there's 5-5-5. There's a variety of breathing patterns here. It says here's a breathe and release strategy. So imagine the nervousness within your body bubbling up inside of you like a liquid being cooked. So you're breathing in, taking all the energy in, and then letting all the breathe it out, like kind of cleansing your body. So that's one of the strategies. There's lots of breathing. Find what works for you. But yeah, definitely those deep breaths can help calm you. Even in the middle of a presentation, that's why I tell students, hey, if you're stuck or forgot where you are, just take a deep breath and get back on track, right? Don't worry about it. The audience isn't going to really notice you breathing for a minute. I mean, they'll notice that you're breathing, but it's not going to disrupt the flow of your presentation if you need to take a moment. Certainly I do that. Other people do as well. It's normal. It's a normal part of public speaking. Another tip here is minimize what you memorize. This is what I always tell my students to don't write out your speech. It's not public reading, it's public speaking. And if you're trying to memorize an entire speech, you're going to get caught up on the specific words. It's like, oh, what word came next? I don't remember. I'd have to dig through my notes. And that's where people get stumped. But if you speak more extemporaneously, it talks about, so if you're having lunch with your friends and describing the plot of a movie, you're being very conversational, or uses the word conversant here. So you're prepared, you know what you're going to talk about, but it's like a conversation. And that's what I recommend doing with public speaking as well. It's like a conversation with the audience. So you're just sharing what you know, you've studied, you've done your research, you have your outline, you know how it's going to be organized. But because you know the topic well, you're just talking to the audience. You're talking to a group of friends at lunch. And it doesn't matter what exact words you use. You may have a few things planned out, but overall, you're just sharing the information with the audience. So it talks again. It's talking about having a written script versus being a conversational speaker. I do recommend being a conversational speaker. Some students have tried to read off their script, so they'll write it out and then they'll sit here and read everything off of their script, and their pausing is weird. Their tone of voice is like you can read well, like you can read with some more vocal variation. But students who write their speeches out overall very monotone. Their pausing is weird, so they don't necessarily pause at the end of the sentences. It's hard to follow along with, hard to listen to. So please do not write out your speeches word for word and then try and read and recite them. I mean, if people who do have scripts, they talked a little bit in here about acting. If you read through it, and about theater, well, actors, they have their script written out, but they also have the vocal variation, the nonverbal expression, how they're going to say each thing. It's a lot of work. You certainly can do it, and people who do speech and debate tournaments, they sometimes will write out a speech and they will focus on how they say each and every word. It's exhausting, right? But certainly you can do it. For the purposes of a classroom, I recommend being conversational because it's easier, right? It's an easier way to do it. It's more practical and I think more realistic for most situations. It does say practice out loud. Again, I recommend recording yourself is a great way to practice out loud, but even talking through it. One of the things that helps too, if you have things written down, even some, brief notes, so we write differently than we talk. So if you're trying to say things in a way that you wrote them down, it may sound unnatural. It's like, oh, I wouldn't say it like that. So when you're practicing out loud, you can start changing those things, even changing your outline. Even if you're not writing out your whole speech, change your outline so it's written like you talk. So it's like, okay, well, I wouldn't say it like that, so let me change that and make it a little bit more natural. Then it also says here, when you're practicing out loud, where during your presentation are you the most or least conversant? Where are you most in need of supportive notes? And what do your notes need to contain? So again, when you're practicing out loud, you're going to know, oh, maybe I need a note here reminding me to transition. Maybe I need this quote written out because I want to say this quote to the audience and I'll need to read that. And then I'm going to practice how I'm going to read it. So what I always recommend to students if they are getting very monotone or, if they're having issues with kind of trying to focus to a script, which you shouldn't do, right? I don't recommend doing that. It's like, okay, find things you can talk about in a conversational way. Sometimes students do a very research heavy presentation. So they have a lot of stats, they have a lot of direct quotes, and they're trying to go through all the research. And it's like, you can't, talk like a researcher. So find things you can just say in a more conversational manner instead of having to quote everything left and right. So get rid of some of the quotes and just talk to the audience like you're talking to a friend, like you're explaining this to a friend. Um, that's going to be helpful. And then customizing your practice. So again, it has a lot of ways in this chapter on how to different types of communication apprehension, sources where it may be coming from, and tips. Find what works for you and what are your biggest challenges, right? So go ahead and do practice on how to overcome those challenges and use some of these variety tips. Maybe breathing really works well for you. Maybe practicing out loud. You want to record yourself practicing because then you can see that you're, hey, I'm doing well. Sometimes we judge ourselves too much, so don't overjudge yourself if you record yourself too. Well, I hate how my voice sounds, right? I hear that from everybody. Everyone hates how their voice sounds. But again, don't nitpick yourself too much. But there are a variety of ways to help you be more confident. So in conclusion, communication apprehension, kind of a fear of public speaking, is very common. There's a lot of sources of communication apprehension that someone may have. Maybe more trade anxiety, maybe more state anxiety, really more of a scrutiny fear. Whatever it may be, there's a lot of ways to help you become a better public speaker. I think one of the best ways is taking public speaking class, right? Taking a public speaking class exposes you to a variety of information on how to form speeches well. And doing good preparation before giving a presentation can help build your confidence. So that's the one thing that you have full control over, how much preparation you have. And then when you get into the speeches, the more speeches that you give, the more confident you're going to be. I remember a speech in high school I just skipped because I was too nervous to give it. But now I teach public speaking for a living. So I give lots of speeches. I get paid to give speeches. So certainly been a journey for me. If I can do it, so can you. And I always believe in my students and want to help support their success by pointing out the strengths they already have. Everybody has strengths when it comes to communication. We're going to help you build on your strengths and, in the ways where you can grow. There's lots of opportunities for improvement. We can work through those as well. Just remember, right? Practice, take some of these tips and hopefully you can apply them to your life and practice. So always feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want any specific tips or information for you. But otherwise, good luck with your speeches, and I look forward to hearing them.